Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here today for our first Site Champion Roundtable of 2023. We really appreciate you all making time for this work over the past many months, and we're really excited to get started in 2023 and lots of good news to share, and look forward to a good discussion today. So my name's Rachel Hauk. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the director of both hospital development and recently have also begun being the director of family support for LifeCenter. So kind of overseeing both of those departments, which is really helpful for what we're going to be talking about today, because both of those departments really have a lot to do with the work we do in the hospitals related to honoring donor decisions, which will be our main topic today. But before we get started, we definitely want to do a connect to purpose. Today, our agenda will include a story of hope, and then also we'll go over what's changing and why it's changing now. We've been talking about it for a number of months, but just a quick review. And then we'll review quickly the law. We've kind of talked about the UAGA many times in different forums over the past year to year and a half. So most of you could almost probably give this presentation, but we always want to make sure we're grounded in what the legal basis for honoring donor decisions is. And then we'll go through some of the work that we've already accomplished related to honoring donor decisions, and really summarize what are all the things that we've done together over the past year, year and a half as we've been working on this. And then really talking about any remaining concerns that are still out there. And we're hoping that it'll be an open discussion. So we have, a handful of slides on each one of these things, but really the most of our time, hopefully we'll be hearing from you on any questions you might have, or suggestions or thoughts or clarifications that you might need. So that's what we're going to do today. But first I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Fritz. If you read this, some of this is just so inspiring. It says he was one of a kind. He grew up in Yakima, Washington, and was known for his free spirit, his sense of adventure, his music, and his long and often colorful hair, his art, and his unique fashion sense. So really a unique guy. He was empathetic, he was funny, smart, deep thinker, and a world traveler. And what I love about his story is that his friend actually said they talked about becoming donors. And his perspective was, yeah, I'm going to be dead. Why would I need my organs? So really just kind of approaching it from the perspective of being able to help folks when he wasn't going to need them anymore. And one day last December, he was only 18, but he was found unconscious. And later he was declared brain dead at Yakima Memorial Hospital. And it was a really, really moving donation experience for, I think, everyone who was part of it, everybody in the hospital, and many, many people in the Yakima community. They did an honor walk for Fritz that included at least 150 people of his classmates. And they lined the hallways as he went to the OR. And his mom mentioned that everyone in that room who was working hard to preserve Fritz's precious gifts, they could feel the presence of his love. So obviously none of us probably knew Fritz when he was alive, but clearly his impact was felt throughout his gift of donation, and his impact on his community was really, really amazing. And that was demonstrated by the many people who came to honor his life and the gift that he gave through donation, which he clearly wanted to give. So that's just a helpful way for us to sort of realize the importance of individuals being able to make their own decisions about donation. And clearly it was something that was important to Fritz and offered a lot of comfort to his family and his loved ones around the community. So there's been actually media coverage of this story if you're interested. Local newspapers, things like that, did a story on him. So Reese is on here, so maybe he can put that information in the chat if anybody's interested in actually looking at that media coverage. It's pretty impactful. So just real quickly to go over the End the Wait campaign objectives and goals. You all are very familiar with them. We've been working through these goals for a number of years now. But there's three: connecting with families, eliminating early extubations, and honoring donor decisions. And we have individualized work in each one of these objectives, all with the goal of achieving a donation rate of 75% or higher. So today we're going to spend most of our time focused on honoring donor decisions, because we know that is work that's coming up right away in April. Hold on. Sorry, I heard someone. Okay, I think everybody's muted now. So we're going to jump right in terms of what's changing and what are next steps for donor registry opposition data and honoring donor decisions. So for honoring donor decisions, what does it actually mean? Well, it's pretty simple. It's facilitating donation in every case where the patient has already made a legally binding donation decision. So if that patient has made that decision, we want to honor that decision that they made. So what are our goals for 2023? Well, starting, we want to continue the work that we've already been doing. As you all probably know, our 2022 focus was really on ensuring that patients who appeared brain dead were declared and that we were able to move forward on those registered donors. And I'll share some data here shortly, but we were very successful in that with all of your help and collaboration. So we want to continue that good work that was already happening in 2022. We want to continue our work with our hospital partners, all of you, to establish processes and policies to support donor registry, both now and in the future. I'm sure many of you are familiar that work is heavily underway in most all of our hospitals, and some of you have already completed this. So that will be continuing in 2023. And finally, beginning in April, we want to work to honor all registered decisions, including those on DCD patients. That's kind of our last step in this process, and we've been preparing for it with all of you. And so that is our focus for this year. So why is this happening? Really, it's about the need for life-saving organs. An average of 17 people die every day waiting for an organ transplant. And in our area last year, 61 people died waiting for an organ. And we really believe that we can have a big impact on that number of people that die waiting for an organ. So that is definitely the biggest part of our mission and the reason that this work is happening. We also know that people can make their own decision about this. And while we could maybe argue whether or not the DMV is the right place to do that, and if everybody understands the ins and outs of that, legally they can make their own decision about whether or not they want to gift their organs and tissues to someone else at the time of their death. So as the organ procurement organization, it's our responsibility as representatives to actually complete that legally binding wish. So that is another reason. And then finally, we know it's critical regardless of the type of donation. The law doesn't specify if the person is declared via brain death or circulatory death. It just simply states that they wanted to make this gift to someone else. And so it's our responsibility, again, based on both of these things, to move forward in all situations if possible. So what's changing? I've already kind of mentioned it, but beginning April 3rd, we're going to be honoring donation decisions of all patients. And what that means is we're going to be working with the hospital and collaborating with all of you on how we move forward on as many of these patients as possible. And so our goal is always a collaborative effort between ourselves and you as our hospital partners. The desired outcome is we want to ensure that the patient autonomy is honored, that we do honor that legally binding gift. And we also want to support families who are going through grief and loss. And so we'll talk today about some of the strategies that we've used to try to do both. And we've seen actually over the course of the last year in many scenarios where we have been able to do both through partnership with LifeCenter and hospitals. And then our goal for 2023, we know that there may be situations, there may be times where this year in particular, we're not able to honor every single DCD donor. So the goal for 2023 is we want to cut this in half. We anticipate that this goal will be increased for 2024. We also know that for the first 3 months of this year, we're kind of operating as we used to. We are already seeing a reduction in registry oppositions, particularly on DCDs, based on some of the work that we've been doing. But we also know that there's going to be hiccups, that there's going to be things that happen. and that we'll all learn from them. And each and every time that we have had a registry opposition, we've completed internal after action reviews, we've completed, after action reviews in collaboration with you as the hospitals, and then I know the hospitals are completing their own internal reviews. And each and every time we learn something and we improve the process and we make it better for the next time. So we fully anticipate a lot of learning this year, with that goal of seeing a 50% reduction over the course of the year. So just really quickly, the legal basis, as we all know, the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act is the law that governs donation, and it is uniform for the most part across all states. And it actually outlines how individuals can document their decision to donate organs and tissues, and also establishes, if they haven't documented their wishes, how do we go about a surrogate decision maker if they do have potential for donation. And it provides immunity for healthcare providers who act in good faith under the UAGA. So obviously we always want to be acting in good faith, and we would never move forward in a case where we knew that they had documented something else or found new information that was in conflict or a later date or something like that. We're always going to be working to make sure that the information we're working with is good faith, and we've done everything that we can to ensure that. We have a very generous community here in the Northwest. More than half of our licensed drivers are actually registered donors. So a lot of people are very altruistic and kind of have that idea like Fritz had of like, I'm going to be dead, so why wouldn't I? And so that just kind of speaks to our community and the really supportive nature of the community. And so the UAGA works in conjunction with those CMS regulatory requirements to ensure that we will honor all donor decisions. Some of the questions that have come up in the past year or so is, how does it actually speak to DCD? So I just want to highlight this part. This is the only piece I'm going to really pull out of the UAGA today. But when a hospital refers an individual at or near death to a procurement organization, the organization may conduct any reasonable examination necessary to ensure the medical suitability of a part that is or could be the subject of an anatomical gift for transplantation, therapy, research, or education from a donor or prospective donor. So that's the first part. The next part that really speaks to that piece around giving additional time to facilitate donation in the case of DCD is this section. It states, during the examination period, measures necessary to ensure the medical suitability of the part may not be withdrawn unless the hospital or procurement organization knows that the individual expressed a contrary intent. So that really is getting at that time period and reasonableness in terms of making sure that we have time to facilitate the transfer of that gift, even if the person is declared using circulatory death instead of death by neurological criteria. So that's kind of just the background on the UAGA, just a quick reminder of some of the key points, particularly around DCD. So how have we been doing on this? What amount are we seeing in terms of registered opposition? So this is our year in review of 2022, and just to kind of orient you for this graph here, the far left bar is the entire LifeCenter donation service area. So that's our entire service area combined. And then you can see along the bottom is each of our individual regions. The top black line is actually the donation rate or conversion rate for registered donors. So you can see that a large majority of our registered donors actually already move forward without any opposition. Families are really glad to know that the patient made the decision, that they don't have to make that decision. And so the vast majority of them actually move forward. And then you can see the blue is registered brain dead opposition. So that is declared brain dead, fully declared. And over the course of the entirety of last year, we only had one of those. And then we have the registered appearing brain dead. So those would be patients that we, along with assessment from the healthcare team, believed were brain dead, but for whatever reason were not declared. Over the course of last year, we had 5 of those. And then the gray portion of the bar graph is registered DCD opposition. So you can see that the vast majority of the opportunity for improvement or honoring more donor decisions is in DCD. Not surprising, because we haven't actually done a lot of work on that. We haven't implemented a standard where we, escalate within the hospital and within LifeCenter around registered oppositions for DCD. So we anticipate that those numbers will decrease this next year. So just to give you an idea of how we did on the registered appearing brain dead. So the blue numbers here are what we saw in 2021. So you can see in 2021, we had 15 registered patients that appeared brain dead that did not go on to donate. And in 2022, we only had 5. So you can see the percentages there significantly lower. And that is because of all of the collaboration and work that this group and many others not on this call did to make that happen. So how are we doing on DCD? About the same as we did in 2021. We had about the same results in 2022. We did see some lower percentages there. You can see in the blue versus the orange, lower percentages towards the end of the year. We believe that had some to do with the preventative measures we were doing, but ultimately we ended the year at essentially the same as we had before. So we anticipate that this will look different when we review it this time next year. So what are we doing in terms of approaching these DCDs, and how are we trying to prevent any donor registry oppositions? So last fall, I think I shared this in the October roundtable, but we actually did an analysis of the DCD registered declines. And what we did find is that the vast majority of them were related to timing. And so 73% of those families actually expressed a desire to support the donation wishes, but it didn't seem to align with the timing that they had around withdrawal of life support. And 9% of those were mixed in those families, and only 18% of them fully were no. And these are kind of small numbers. You saw on the last slide, there was 32. So it's not huge amounts of numbers. And so we really do believe that we can kind of address this timing issue by using a lot of different levers that we can pull to try to make sure that we align what we're doing with the timing the family wants. So what is the progress that we've made? So kind of summary, most registered potential donors move forward without any resistance. We saw significant improvement in the appearing brain dead potential donors. As I said, the registered DCD offers us the most opportunity for continued improvement. And most of our DCD registered declines are related to timing. We've already made significant improvements across many of our hospitals and policies, processes, procedures, education, all of that. And we anticipate a lot more in 2023. And our goal is really to prevent as many oppositions as we possibly can and have a good plan for those that can't be prevented. So just a couple more slides and then we'll open it up for discussion. Wanted to give a quick sample of what a hospital donor registry opposition process might look like. We have a number of our hospitals who have already done some of this work, but essentially LifeCenter and the healthcare team would be alerted to the potential opposition. We would then huddle with members of our team and your team to review what is the policy, what's the escalation protocol, and we'd make a plan for how we might re-engage with the family. And so then we would have further conversation with the family to see if we could resolve the opposition. If they're still opposed, we're going to continue to support the family and explore the nature of the opposition. And this is where that collaboration really comes in to play. We've had some donor registry oppositions where that supporting the family and exploring the nature happens through hospital staff. Sometimes that supporting the family and exploring the nature of the opposition happens through LifeCenter staff. It's really case specific on what we think is going to be most effective and most helpful for this individual family in this particular case. So that's really decided on in the moment through the individuals there at the hospital that are assessing that particular case. And we continue to huddle as needed with the appropriate players on each side, both LifeCenter and the hospital, make a plan and reapproach the donor family if necessary. And really kind of the overarching piece is that we're collaborating while supporting the donation decision and the family needs with the hope of being able to do both of those simultaneously. So that's a sample. All of your hospital development program managers have access to sample escalation protocols if you need any of those. And I know that they're all actively working with you to make sure that we have these protocols in place prior to that April 3rd date. So finally, I just wanted to kind of list what we've heard. So we've heard that there's kind of two sides to the equation. There are concerns, and then there's areas of support. So I'm going to read through these, and then we're going to open it up for discussion for any questions you might have or areas that you might want to dig into more. But concerns. You're concerned about family harm or distress. You're concerned about family timing needs. You're concerned about asking families to delay withdrawal of life support. You're concerned about potential safety issues. You're concerned about the media or legal issues. And you are concerned about the lack of community awareness. While simultaneously, you're supportive of saving more lives. You're supportive of upholding the ethical principle of autonomy. You're supportive of the UAGA. You're supportive of following state law and federal regulations. And you care about those in your community who are on the waiting list. So it's really kind of both of those things being true at the same time. And so I would love to open it up for discussion, questions, things that are on your mind. And I'm going to stop sharing so that if anybody wants to share their screen other than me, then I would welcome that. But I'll just open it up for questions and commentary.
Hi, my name is Erin Lowry, and I manage the progressive and critical care at Skagit Valley Hospital. Can you hear me okay? My Wi-Fi's been a little crazy this morning.
Yes, we can hear you for sure.
Yeah, so we had a bit of a difficult situation back in July with one of our first where the family kind of didn't disagree with it, and there was some challenging conversations. And I think it was really around the timing of when that message was delivered, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I just spoke with one of my charge nurses around our last case, which went really well. And she said, we never really got any follow-up on like what the learnings were from that July case. So I think it's really important to get that feedback, and I appreciate you guys sharing that that's been a learning so that I can pass that on to my team.
Yeah. Well, I can add a little bit of detail. You said that you felt like the timing of the conversation was maybe what led to some of the opposition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in fact, we've been doing a lot of work internally after that analysis of kind of seeing the timing being such a concern. And one of the big things that we are working on with both in the hospitals as well as internally at LifeCenter with our family support team is really ensuring that we are talking to the family at the right time. So for many years, actually, we have been told by families that you're talking to us too late. If you had told us this yesterday, we would have said yes. Or, if you had told us when palliative care came in, we could have talked about this. And so we're trying to do what we're calling daily family readiness assessment. So we're asking very specific questions every time we are following a patient. We're asking, obviously, the clinical questions. We want to know about their clinical course, but we're also asking, does the family know that this is unsurvivable? Are they understanding that? Have they started gathering at the bedside? Have they mentioned funeral arrangements? Like really intentional questions about assessing how the family is doing while we're simultaneously assessing that clinical donation potential. And then based on some of those answers, then we're working to talk to the family as soon as they're ready to hear that information so that they can actually be planning for donation to happen rather than it being a surprise at the very last minute that it's even a possibility. So that's kind of what we've been doing, and we've been seeing excellent results from those conversations.
Yeah, and I'll pass that on to my team too, that they might be getting more of those conversations. I think the other learning that we had taken from our specific situation was that the donation team kind of asked the family how they felt about it when we already knew that they were, an organ donor and that the decision had been made. And so we kind of gave them the opportunity to say no, but then had to come back and say, well, actually we can't. And so, just making sure that that feedback is making its way back to you guys as well.
Yeah, and I would say that's another really big focus with our family support team right now is being very intentional about how we're speaking to families in these early conversations. Because as we know, it isn't really a choice, in fact. And so giving that false sense that it is a choice can be very jarring for a family when they find out it's not. So we are doing a lot of work, and especially in anticipation of that April date, with additional training, additional resources, additional support for our family support team, so that when those conversations are happening, it's teed up in the correct way for the family and what their expectations should be.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Appreciate that, Erin. What other thoughts or questions are coming up for folks?
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Dr. Allen. How are you?
Good. Let's see. I just wanted to see, I appreciate you sharing this sort of slide, talking through you're sharing some donor registry opposition pieces. Can you kind of talk me through the current approach from the LCNW perspective on donor registry opposition in DCD cases?
Yeah, I can talk about it. Do you have anything particular you're concerned about, or what specifically would be most helpful?
So this process is somewhat different, right? That in brain death cases, as we have had the approach that we've seen followed recently is that we're going to follow, the LCW wants to follow the UAGA to the letter. And that means that because this person has now been declared dead, that all really fully applies.
Mm-hmm.
It is more complex in DCD situations because that person is not yet, deceased. And so I appreciate the work on trying to understand origins of family oppositions, trying to be able to approach people more effectively before that occurs. But when we're thinking about writing our policy on this here, one of our key questions is, at the end of the game, what's the position? Because that changes how we structure things. And because I'm just concerned about, like we just talked about with the previous respondent,
Mm-hmm.
asking questions when we don't have a firm intention of following the answer we get, right? We're asking someone's permission,
Mm-hmm.
but we might not agree with what's been said, or we might not follow that. And so I just kind of want to try to understand where we're at, where LCNW is at with that, and what the thoughts are with that moving forward.
Yeah, so you're concerned about the difference between DCD and what LCNW's approach might be when the patient's not fully declared.
Right, I'm concerned. So we have a patient who a family has reached a decision to withdraw life-sustaining treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And this person is a registered donor.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of time necessary for them to actually proceed to donation may measure in a few days. Okay. And there is strong family opposition to that.
Yeah,
we fully support working with people to minimize opposition and conflict up front, to understanding people's perspectives, to supporting them, to looking at all aspects of this. But how do you think those situations are best resolved?
Yeah, I mean, I think those situations are best resolved as a collaborative effort between the hospital and LifeCenter based on the case specific. What I would say around the piece around multiple days, so actually we would ask for multiple days. That absolutely is not what we would do. We are working on a project internally at LifeCenter, which should be ready to go early March, that will actually be testing prior to this go live date of actually escalating DCD patients, so that we can anywhere in our service area go to allow withdrawal of life support within a certain amount of time that would be measured in hours, not days. So that is something that we're actively working on, and specifically related to our surgical team availability. And it wouldn't be that there would be a difference between Billings, Montana or downtown Seattle. It would be the same across the entire service area. So I think In terms of how long we would want a family to wait, it certainly would not be days. If that was something LifeCenter could not facilitate, we would not pursue that case, because that's something that's on us. The law is pretty vague about reasonable. Some OPOs have interpreted it to be however long it takes. We're not taking that approach. We are taking a much more, a shorter approach, and making sure that we have the staff, structure, processes in place that if a family says, you know, it's noon now, we want to be done by tomorrow morning, okay, or it's noon now, we want to be done by midnight, like we want to be able to try to meet those timelines with whatever reasonable would look like in a given case. So that's something we're working on. But I guess the position of LifeCenter, I would really say it's going to be something that we would want the hospital's legal and ethics to review in terms of how you put your policy together as a hospital. I mean, we know what LifeCenter's position is. We want to honor every donor decision. That's our position. We also know that that's a collaborative effort between us and all of our hospitals. And so our recommendation when there's questions is to involve the hospital legal team, the hospital ethics team, so that you can get your questions answered around how you want to write your policy, and then we follow the policy. Recognizing state law, what it is, that's going to be, you know, an interpretation for your own legal counsel, not ours.
Right, because there are also provisions within the UAGA for resolving conflict between an organ donation designation and end-of-life care preferences. And so is that something that you guys have supported inclusion of in those policies?
So I have a reference document that was put out by the national commissioners when they made the law. They actually put out an entire document that sort of puts comments on each of them. They did put out some material stating that there is no conflict between advance directives and donation. Our legal counsel shared with me that it should not be construed as a conflict, and it should be resolved as quickly as possible. But I'd really recommend, you know, you consulting with the hospital's legal counsel in terms of how they would want to approach that. But that's my understanding and the documentation that we've reviewed that was put out from the National Conference of Commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Allen. What other questions are there? These are really great questions and they come up, I think, regularly. So don't be shy.
Hi, my name is Bevan. I work in Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. I'm manager of the ICU here. I was listening to you speak earlier about your LifeCenter Northwest internal work to move things forward in a more succinct, quicker fashion. And I'm wondering if that's something that you think that you're going to be able to support in our facility as well, being that we oftentimes aren't able to get people here you know, within an hour type time frame to begin with. So I'm just wondering the level of support for us in that circumstance.
Yeah, well, and I don't think we would be able to facilitate a whole donation case within an hour of anywhere. But yes, our plan is that regardless of whether you're in Fairbanks or in Seattle, the same time frame, the same rapidness, reasonableness, all of that would apply regardless of location. So that would apply to you all in Fairbanks, just as it would apply to downtown Seattle. Obviously, that requires some work on our end to get folks where they need to be. But again, we would look at those individual cases in terms of what's reasonable, what's the fastest we can do it, and then we would try to, as much as possible, get as close to what the family wanted as we can. And we'd work with you in the hospital to do that. So we know that, like, you know, generally we could set a goal of, say, we want to facilitate this within 12 hours. But at 12 hours and 1 minute, that doesn't become like an unreasonable time frame. So we want to work with all of the hospitals, but the vision and what's been set out by our VP is that we need to be able to have a process that works anywhere in our area. So
I would add to Bevan just that in the work that we're doing internally, we're looking at these family readiness assessments and how we can speak to families in a more timely fashion. And when we're doing that, we're addressing a lot of the timing concerns before they become this last minute urgent issue. And so we can plan ahead for 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever that's going to look like, as opposed to waiting until a family's decided to end life support, and at that point they're maybe ready to go home then and there. And so we're trying to figure out how to look at this further upstream so that we can mitigate the conflict before it actually happens.
Yeah.
I think additionally, one of the big concerns that our facility has is that we are just such a small community, and we're really worried about damaging community relationships potentially if an opposition were ever to progress to.
Yeah.
Hopefully it could be resolved and with conversations and stuff, but if that were ever to not be the case, we're just super worried about what that's going to look like for our community.
Yeah, you're just worried because it's kind of a small town and everybody knows everybody, and what might happen if somebody was really upset with the hospital. Yeah. And I don't know that, we can ever upstream address every single one of those things. What we have found is in the past, even when these have happened in smaller community hospitals, and we actually had a scenario several years ago before we ever started doing this work where a family member actually did go to the media, and the local newspaper wrote up, how upset the family was. And what ended up happening in that community, as well as kind of in the broader community that got picked up, is everyone was like, why wouldn't you want to do this? It just didn't go the way the family wanted it or was anticipating for it to go. We don't know if that would happen every time. Certainly we don't. But, there is a lot of generally positive support for donation, and survey after survey indicates that the general public is very supportive. I don't think we can plan for every scenario of how it might play out in any individual community. And what I would say is we just work together the best way possible that we can to mitigate any of those scenarios that we can, case by case, and still do what we need to do in terms of honoring the decision. Justin?
I would add as well that whenever one of these happens, whether it moves forward or it doesn't move forward, they're really difficult cases, even when the process works the way it's supposed to. So I want to acknowledge that they take a lot of work, they can be very stressful. And at the end of the day, we're trying to keep these ideals and altruistic position and this patient's autonomy at the forefront of it. But I would recommend whenever we have one of these, whether you have a really robust process or not, really debriefing either internally or with LifeCenter. And if there's ever a request for us to work more collaboratively with your team or with your local community around educating people on what this looks like, I think we're open to that. As LifeCenter goes, we have our own community outreach team that really focuses on working with the DMVs and driver's ed and things like that. But I think in these communities that you're talking about, especially places like Fairbanks and other areas in our service area, I think there's an opportunity to partner with hospitals if you feel like that is an area of opportunity where we can be proactive. So we don't have the tentacles and outreach that you guys have in that community, and so we'd lean a lot on the hospital to try and figure out how to best support that. But we're always open and welcome to come up and try and provide more information, whether it's before a case or after one.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add is, looking to your hospital's mission, vision, and values in terms of how you want to approach this and how it aligns with the hospital's mission, the support of the broader community, the support of the patient and their autonomy. I mean, you all do this beautifully day in and day out. And I'm sure that there's other situations that may be tenuous that you navigate. And so I feel like kind of looking to those as your guide about how the hospital wants to do this that's been really helpful in some cases. So that might be a recommendation. Thank you for your question. Anything else?
I just wanted to acknowledge in the chat that Phyllis had just mentioned that she lost sound. And Phyllis, we have a recording of this meeting if there's any portions you missed that we'll send to you afterwards. But has anyone else lost sound? If so, you can say so in the chat, but I have not heard anything on my end.
Thanks, Reese. Hopefully everybody can still hear me. Thanks. What other questions?
I'm curious if there are any questions or concerns about some of the concerns we shared earlier that maybe we haven't addressed yet from the previous slide. I know we put a lot of those things up that we'd heard from either hospitals directly or in individual conversations. So if we can address any of those now for you guys, we'd love to do that.
And if not, we can move forward to kind of the next steps and kind of what you can expect from here. But I'll pause one more second here just to any last takers. We really want this to be an opportunity. If there are any, concerns, questions, we want those to be heard and voiced so that you guys have plenty of opportunity to talk about this.
Hi, Rachel. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Heather from Holy Family. I had a question just to really clarify this. Would there be ever a scenario on your end where the family were just so against it and it's sort of been presented and I'm supportive of, I'm sorry that you don't like this, but we're doing it anyways, like not really optional. And that seems to be kind of the sticking point. Are there scenarios where you would back off and not honor the donor's wishes, or is that just not something that you would ever really consider?
I think our position is we want to honor 100% of registered donors because those are authorized by the patient themselves. And so whatever we can do to do that. However, I think we also know that not every case is straightforward. And there may be some scenario that we're not planning for that would cause us to say, you know what, in this case, we are not going to do that. So to say that we would never walk away from a case, I don't think I could say that. And certainly that's why we made our goal a 50% reduction. We know that we can do more. We also know that there's, like I said, going to be hiccups. There's going to be things that we're not prepared for. And maybe we're able to correct those for the future. Or maybe it's that one-off case where it's like, yep, we never do that one. But that's going to be a decision that I would say would be made collaboratively between the hospital and LifeCenter on those individualized cases. But with the vision and the goal that we really want to try to honor as close to 100% as we possibly can. Does that
That's
help?
great, thanks. Yeah, no, it does. And I presented like a really black and white yes, no
Yeah.
scenario, which as we all know in this profession, nothing is, but
Yeah.
I was just curious how far down that road you go. And thankfully you haven't experienced, you won't experience it, haven't experienced it yet, but
Yeah.
just curious.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a great one. Anybody else? Thank you all for your very good questions. I think really what we were intending is just to be able to make sure that you all were heard, had an opportunity to raise any concern, to ask any questions. We want this to be a collaborative process. We know certainly it aligns with our mission, vision, and values, and we do believe that it aligns with most of the hospital's mission, vision, and values. That doesn't always mean that it's easy work to be doing. But we still do it because it's the right thing to do. So let me just share my screen one more time here and we'll go through the last couple of slides. So in terms of next steps, what can you do to prepare? work with your Life Center program manager to assess, how ready your hospital is for this change. If you're working on those policies and processes, we can certainly help with that. The hospital development staff from Life Center have actually planned an education blitz for the coming weeks in advance of that April date. So they are ready, willing, and able to do frontline staff education for anybody, any location that you're able to. I've also told them that I'm available to help with that if needed. So I'm sure many of them have already reached out to you, but this was something I believe that in the survey that we did back at the last Site Champion Roundtable that was requested, that we do more hospital staff education at the front line. So we are happy to provide that. And then really encouraging early collaboration from your teams on the ICU of sharing that information about the family readiness. And also, broad communication about the patient's registry status. I think, knowing the patient's registry status and that family readiness assessment can be really helpful for us in partnering with you all, and you all as the healthcare team kind of planning, any conversations that you might be having. Just having that in the back of your mind is always helpful. So those are kind of next steps that we've identified. We'll, of course, be in more communication around this, and you'll be continuing to hear from us about this. And the only thing remaining is really our next Site Champion Roundtable will be March 28th. We're not doing the monthly cadence anymore. That was also feedback that you all had provided around kind of doing it maybe every other month or every 6 weeks. So we're trying to make that adjustment based on the feedback you provided in December. And again, we just so appreciate you all making yourselves available for this and spending this time with us each month because it makes such a huge difference in the hospitals. And with that, I just want to thank everybody again for coming and for being here, but I will just stay on for a minute if anybody has any other questions. Welcome to unmute and ask them. And if not, I will give you a few minutes back in your schedule, which I know everybody always appreciates. All righty. Well, hearing no questions, I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you again for your time, and we will see you next time, and we'll be in touch in the meantime.